All right, special treat today for this surprise pop-up live stream. Mike Meltzer, my first co-host in radio ever. You can find him on Sirius XM still to this day, but he's also a practicing attorney, like a full-time attorney, an actual adult, and the man who taught me, like the first. I'm not going to say everything I know about radio, but the first 100% of the first 3 years that I did radio, and then I learned a little bit along the way. Mike Meltzer, there he is. What's up, man? I should have given you a chance to do a sound check or something before you came on.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Where are you
Tremendous.
at work right now?
Uh, I'm at my home.
Okay.
I'm working from home. But the
Yeah.
question is, am I at work? I'm not at my technical office location. If that answers your question.
You have an office? Like,
Well, I just have an extra room that I've turned into an office, I would say.
do you have? What about your law firm? Because you're a partner in your
Oh, we have an
firm, right?
office. Yes, downtown.
Yeah. You guys.
We literally rent like a. It's actually, I think you'd like it. Actually, it's kind of up your alley. We rent like kind of like a medium-sized room on a floor where everybody, like these small companies, rent rooms or larger offices, and that's where we are.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it's like a WeWork except a different company, and like they do an excellent job.
And not defunct. Okay.
Not defunct. Yeah,
All right,
not
good,
not the
good.
subject of like 6-part documentaries on like Netflix or Hulu or whatever.
And as Zach Williams says, I don't know if is it Harris County time or what. Okay. I don't know what that means. I didn't know if that was a time zone reference or not. There's a good
Is that a
chance that
reference to Christian Harris?
Is it Harris County time? All right, yeah, we'll get to Christian Harris. I know I saw this and I knew it would be right up your alley, and I think you used the actual phrase. There are very few things in life more up my alley than Nick Caserio ethering the league office today in his news conference. I haven't had a chance. I know you're on Landry's live stream. What was your initial first gut like? Was it you go, Nick, or hey, dial it back a little bit, Nick?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. I really enjoy when people who have power, like both parties have a lot of power, and then they're like crushing each other in public.
Yeah.
I just really enjoy that kind of fighting. Like in my own personal life, I'm more about like resolution and getting like kind of bringing people together. But in that situation, listen, it was a bad hit. It was not a great scene afterwards, which I think contributed to the suspension. But like for the NFL to impugn the character of Aziz Al-Shaiir in that statement they had, like what was the point of that? All it needed to be was like a 2 or 3 sentence, if that summary. Basically, a legal hit plus whatever happened afterwards, 3-game suspension. End press release. That is all we needed. That is it. That is all we needed out of that. And instead, like I thought the press release was the reason why the Texans organization seems so upset. And I feel like that's rightfully so.
What was the name of the woman that made all the movies for the Nazis there?
Oh gosh, was it Lenny Riefenstahl?
Yeah, Lenny Riefenstein. They felt like a Lenny Riefenstein, John Runyon production. That's who John Runyon is. He's the Goebbels of the NFL right now. Okay. Now I want your opinion on this as a practicing partner attorney in your law firm. The way the process is all set up, Runyon delivers that statement without ever having actually spoken to Aziz Al-Shaiir, without having gotten his take or his explanation of what happened during the melee afterwards. That seems fundamentally flawed to me. At least when you're going to deliver the statement in that regard or in that manner.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think for most investigations, if not all of them, I feel like a key part of any investigation, whether it's sports or just life related, is you interview the subject of the investigation, right?
Yeah.
Like that would seemingly be a key part of it. And maybe they feel like that was unnecessary. But if that's the case, then why are you going after Aziz Al-Shaiir the way that you are? But yeah, I would think in any sort of disciplinary measure like this, like what's the downside? What is the downside of John Runyon and or Ramon Foster, who was doing, I guess, the second level review of the appeal? Like, what is the downside of them talking to Aziz as they figure out whether it's going to be 3 games or 2 or whatever?
Yeah, it's not like a court case where the guy can choose to plead the fifth or something. They're going to talk to him or at least give him the opportunity at some point. Yeah, so the other part of it, and I thought this was interesting, and I'm guessing that more Houston fans were at odds with this part of your opinion, which was why is anyone surprised by Aziz
Yes.
Al-Shaiir? He's Vontez perfect light.
Yeah.
If you don't want it, don't sign him. This is who he's always been, and I say this with no emotion. Either way.
Yeah. Some guy responded. They were like, whenever anyone says they're posting with no emotion, there's a ton of emotion behind it.
I know. I will speak. I will vouch for you on this. I think that you're saying that maybe a little bit passive aggressively without emotion.
Maybe.
But there was a part of it that I feel like that's your okay. So if I'm gonna dissect what you said there, what do you expect when you sign Aziz Al-Shaiir? I would argue that Vontez Burfict was an actual headhunter. Like he was going out and he was trying to hit guys in the head and everything. You said Vontez Burfict light. But in terms of what did maybe DeMeco Ryans expect from Aziz Al-Shaiir? Like did you feel at this, because when Aziz Al-Shaiir had the late hit versus the Titans, that actually, to me, I said at the time, like he's got to dial it back a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's like, you can't be doing that. You're a leader on the team. Like you got to teach these young guys how to rein in the aggression and dial it back just a tick. But I guess, do you expect Aziz Al-Shaiir to operate any differently when he comes back?
I would hope so. And here's the thing about Twitter or Blue Sky or anything. It's like, I wish that, we in the sort of content generating business, I wish there could be like this blanket thing of like, you post things at times and you might like sleep on it for a night or two or three and you'll be like, that might have been like a little harsh or whatever. Yeah. It's not like the stuff that we post is like emblazoned into some tablet that people are going to be looking back on like in thousands of years into the future. You know what I mean? It's like,
not starting a religion here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm giving you my thoughts and I might change my mind a little bit. So in reflecting on the tweet, I was probably maybe like 10 to 15% harsh, but to your point, between the late hit against Tennessee, the punch on Roschon Johnson in week 2 on Sunday night, and some of those antics, combined with leaving the hit on Lawrence aside, the actions after the hit, like maybe saying he's Vontez Burfict light is going a little too far, but I think it's very fair to say that he has stepped over the line a couple of times this season to where when I look at him coming back for the Tennessee game, hopefully the postseason, like if I'm just evaluating Aziz Al-Shaiir, I would say good player, needs to rein it in a little bit based on what's happened in 2024. Yeah. Like, I don't know who would disagree with that.
Right. No, I think that's probably, I guess with, and then maybe the surprising part for me in all of it has been DeMeco. And, I fully was 100% on board with Caserio and DeMeco supporting their player, coming out in favor of him. I feel like DeMeco, in both the incident in the Chicago game and then in this latest incident, he criticized the other team's sideline, which is that's not in kind of DeMeco's standard operating procedure, I think, where he just actively criticizes another team. And then in both those instances, I don't know if this is just a testament to the other coaches like Eberflus or Peterson and just them trying to keep it professional, or if they respect DeMeco that much that they didn't really fire back in that regard. Like they kind of said, hey, DeMeco's going to support his guy. I get it. Because I don't, like lots of guys get in near altercations on the sideline, but they don't punch somebody in the head.
Yes.
The one in Jacksonville, I can't criticize Aziz for that because like it was just such a melee, and I felt like the Jaguars were the ones that were continuing it more so than anybody else. But I was surprised that DeMeco went after basically the other team and lashed out like that.
Yeah, I was surprised because he didn't do it he didn't do it last Sunday. He did it the next day, right, at the Monday news conference, which indicates it's like he, slept on it, kind of took stock, maybe kind of gauge where people were on the situation. And my bigger thing with DeMeco, and you played with him, so you would know a lot more than me, and I'm curious your perspective, but I sense that there at times is like a frustration with like the Texans fan base, or even like nationally, this is a little bit different with the way that DeMeco handled this situation, talking into a microphone. And my thought has been, if you look at DeMeco as a player in Houston and in Philadelphia, you look at the way that he talked to reporters and the way that he talks to reporters now, like this is who he's always been. Like if people, like on the issue of, let's say, Bobby Slowick or the offense, if people were expecting somebody who talked and acted like Bill O'Brien or Bill Belichick or, whoever, or Dennis Green, Like, that's not who DeMeco Ryans is or ever has been. Like, he's never been that kind of guy. So when it comes to these matters, I guess I was a little surprised, to your point, that he was openly critical of the Jaguars sideline, because then he's, directly criticizing other players. But as far as DeMeco, like, as a media person overall, there's very little that has surprised me based on how he was as a player.
Yeah.
So one of the things I tweeted last week, which didn't really get much traction for whatever reason, but I asked a rhetorical question, like, if people are disappointed with what DeMeco was saying into a microphone, what exactly were they expecting when the Texans hired him a year and a half ago, based on how he has been for like the last 15 years in football?
I guess, yeah. Do you think people just want more frankness, or just being more critical of his own players at times?
Because probably a combination of those two.
I think that's pretty much what I expected, or how I expected to go with DeMeco, especially after the first year. Is okay, he's pretty milquetoast in his comments, and he's just gonna kind of try not to give too much substance. He's really good at playing it close to the vest when it comes to game time decisions.
Yes.
Who's the quarterback gonna be when CJ was injured last year? All of that. But yeah, I wondered if there was adversity, if people are gonna start to get frustrated with DeMeco just, I guess, not being more of an open book. I've seen it every different way, and you're a Jets fan. You've seen every different type of coach. Like, I still would much rather prefer a DeMeco than, say, I don't know, Rex Ryan or somebody like that.
Well, let's use a direct Houston reference, Seth. The way DeMeco Ryans is with the media seems very opposite, or at least very different, from Ime Udoka, right?
Yeah.
Like direct opposite almost. Like, I mean, Ime, who's playing,
Ime will just say, I tore into him at halftime.
Yes.
That was the change in the game, and that's different than what you hear out of DeMeco.
Yes, I mean, Ime, with these regular season games, like if Şengün or Green or whoever, like, or Van Vliet, if some of his best players are not playing well or showing the kind of like effort that he wants, he will just say that into the microphone.
Yeah.
Now, I think most football coaches, like, I also think that's a football-basketball divide. That's more acceptable in basketball. Football, like, that would be like a big news story nationally if you did something like that. But I do think it reflects like a stylistic difference between DeMeco on the one hand and Ime Udoka on the other hand. But I'm always thinking, like, behind closed doors, there is accountability. Like,
yeah.
I don't think there's some lack of accountability because DeMeco Ryans is not skewering Bobby Slowick to the media once a week. Like, that to me, those are two totally different things.
Well, no, I think Aziz Al-Shaiir would be the first one to tell you how hard it is to play for DeMeco Ryans. They butt heads sometimes, because DeMeco, especially when Aziz was a young player, DeMeco's just always on him. And I know that, you know why? Because Brandy's a coach like that, she's super, super nice, but also is just so demanding in attention to detail that, like, it's hard to get coached by somebody, whether they're yelling at you or not, where they're just always just like demanding the minute attention to detail.
Yes.
And that's what, to me, that's always been what a tough coach is. Like, I've had really tough coaches who were super, super nice, like Dick Duran, nicest guy in the world, but he coached you hard. And then you've got Tom Coughlin, who is just the exact opposite, but they both are just hammering the details all the time. That's the part that's hard with the coaching. So I'm A-okay with DeMeco, at least the way he's handled the offensive side of the ball. I guess the other side of it, the overarching side, is, okay, DeMeco is a defensive coordinator versus DeMeco is a head coach. Like, how do you see that so far?
Good question. I mean, obviously, when you're a defensive coordinator, it's like you're almost like a lieutenant in the military, essentially. It's like, this is your unit, the defense, and you're not going to be, thinking much about the offense like he was in San Francisco. Like, I think he's done largely a pretty good job. One of the things I was worried about going into the season, because I was expecting the offense to be more explosive, I thought there were times in 2023 where he was a little too conservative with kicking field goals or not going for it on fourth downs. I tweeted maybe like mid-October that I worried that Fairbairn's range was kind of detrimental to the offense, in the sense that they were settling for some of these longer field goals, which he was making at the expense of like the higher, EV, so to speak, plays of going for it on fourth down. But I think he's been better at that recently. I mean, it's hard. Like he has a team that's underachieving, like relative to the talent level. Has he done a great job with that? It's hard to say. Like I will say this: people are pretty down with this team, and I get why. But other than the Minnesota game, like even with the way they've played, when they played two of the better teams in the league, the Lions, who might be the best team in the NFL, the Packers, who I think are somewhere in the top 8 or 10. They lost those games on a last-second field goal. It's not as if they're underachieving to the point where they're non-competitive in games. It's more so like you see them playing at a higher level against better competition. And then the unfortunate thing has been there have been times like Jacksonville, obviously the Tennessee game, where the level has fallen to the level of those teams. But also I would say like when they lose, they have typically bounced back, and the effort at minimum is very good the next week. Yeah. So I credit him for that. And I'm very eager to see what happens in these next 4 weeks because they should make the postseason. Obviously, the magic number is 2. I think the way the schedule sets up, you better win on Sunday. Otherwise, things might get a little hairy here. So you better win on Sunday against Miami. But I am big on, like, even if your team is underachieving, like, you have 4 to 5 months with this team, with this talent. So can at some point you improve the football team? It's still possible, even though it's late in the season, for them to improve. So I will hold out hope for that, especially offensively.
That's right. I feel like this 3-game stretch of 3 games in 11 days is almost like a mini playoffs. Or almost like last year, the Colts game was a play-in game. This almost feels like a play-in for credibility in the playoffs. Or how much do you allow yourself to get excited about the Texans if they're facing Baltimore in Baltimore or Kansas City in Kansas City? And even if they win 2 of these next 3 and they lose to either Miami or the Ravens, I'm still going to feel better about how they'll do against those teams in the playoffs, like even the team they lost to, if they win this one. I'm glad you brought up the Udoka thing because you pointed out the difference between the offense and the defense. The game after, I can't remember which loss it was, where Udoka said that they were soft that game. The best thing about that I loved was that Van Vliet completely agreed with him. Like the Patriots, Gerard Mayo calls his defense soft, and all of a sudden it's a talking point on all the shouty shows and everything. They're like, oh, I can't believe he called them soft. He called his own team soft. Oh my God. Like, all right, well, yeah, like sometimes you're soft, and then you get tough again the next week. So for Van Vliet to come out and say, yeah, we were soft. We got to be better than that. Like, I like that maturity on a team. I like that kind of leadership instead of guys getting sensitive about it or I can't believe you questioned my toughness. Everybody's soft. Nobody's hard 100% of the time. And cut that up and use it as a drop, however you like it.
I was really intrigued by your point. I think you made like a week or 2 ago where you talked about, I forget the exact detail, but like with just some of this newfangled technology with these like, barometric trackers or these things that they have on the football players and it's not just NFL players, it's obviously across sports, but you had, I'm really paraphrasing here, so correct me if I'm like wrong on any of this part, but basically like that there's a risk that when you do that and you see like the fatigue levels and all that there is a risk in the team getting a little soft.
Like it's an opportunity for softness. That's how I should have put it. It's the same way, the way I feel about injuries. Like I feel like as a player, you should always want to minimize your own injuries publicly because it removes an excuse that you can make. Like if you never use injuries as an excuse and that's your policy, I think you've got a tendency to just in the back of your mind you don't have that as an excuse. Like I hate it when offensive linemen get beat in a pass pro and then get up limping. Because that's a classic.
That's always been.
Bad offensive line. Like, oh, well, sure, I totally could have blocked Micah Parsons there, but I got an owie on my ankle. Go die. So with the GPS stuff, but on the offensive line especially, that's where I feel like, okay, sometimes they're tracking the GPS and everything. They're like, oh, wait, no, Shaq Mason needs a break today. Laramie Tunsil can't practice till Friday. I feel like at that offensive line position, oh, no. They're only 90% physically. That unit needs to operate as a group. And if it's bad and if it's lagging, sometimes guys are going to have to fight through some stuff to get that timing and everything else down on by game day. So but DeMeco's also, he's one of the toughest guys out there. And I think it's a matter of kind of like with AJ Hinch, you got to balance the analytics with the actual how you're seeing it as a coach.
I'm curious. I imagine that the offensive line has been probably your biggest source of frustration this season. Yeah. I would guess. I don't know that for a fact. But it fascinates me because now there's a whole lot of like revisionist history criticism of like, how could you go into the season with, this situation at left guard? And I'm thinking like, was this a massive talking point in July or August where people were super down on the team? I don't think it was. I think it was more of a question mark. My frustration is that I know this is trotted over territory, beating a dead horse, but like they have significant investments in all 5 of these offensive line spots. And it's not just 2024. Like last year, the offense, the running game was mostly trash with the exception of like 5 good Devin Singletary games. And then like going back before that with the different regimes, Lovie Smith, David Culley, O'Brien, like it's so frustrating that why is it so difficult to just run the football? Like if they could get an average running game here, just average,
right?
They can't even get it. They can't even really sniff an average running game unless it's the games where Joe Mixon goes off. And that is what really frustrates me and perplexes me.
The thing, okay, this is how I've been with the offensive line this year. During training camp, I was growing steadily more and more alarmed at what I was seeing in practice because it looked like either Foley Fatukasi and Mario Edwards are about to be all pro, or they just got into the Belco stash from back in the day or something. Yeah. They were just so thoroughly destroying the interior offensive line to the point where the offense couldn't get a playoff. But you also had the offensive tackles weren't practicing a lot, so there were backups there. And it looked bad all throughout training camp. I was getting really nervous about it then. I was still trying to just figure, all right, this can congeal with time and it'll look better. I felt better. A lot of it coincides with when Jarrett Patterson went to center. I think a lot of the miscommunication errors and the mental stuff, like the really egregiously sloppy stuff, fell by the wayside a bit. And now my concern is more like that, okay, they're not as sloppy as they were. They're not making the mental errors and communication errors, but when they go up against the Lions and the Titans, teams that have really tough physical defensive lines, they just can't move those guys. And like Laramie Tunsil's he's not a road grader, and I think Laramie Tunsil's really awesome at what he does, but he's not the complete and total package of a Trent Williams or a Penei Sewell or somebody like that. And then, on the interior offensive line, likewise, the matchups in the run game, it's tough if they got to actually just go out and play bully ball. So that's where but you're right. It feels like it's been the common theme ever since you and I started doing radio together in 2012.
Oh yeah.
It's just been it's been a constant wondering of like what the heck's going on here and why are these guys not better than they are. Thank you for the person who told me that my mic was a little bit low. We're also getting questions about this. This was you, me, and our good friend Iggy Azalea. Who I have zero memory of this, Sean. Do you know why we were talking to Iggy Azalea and just how it came about?
So I remember this was a. So I don't know that we had her on live. I think this was one of. I could be wrong, but I think we like taped it.
We recorded it in Bo's studio. I remember now. Yes.
Yeah, we recorded in Bo's studio. I just remember that she was like obviously promoting something in Houston, and we were like. Not that we were against doing the interview, but we were like roped into doing it. I remember doing like a bunch of research, but it was like, all right, let me text some of my female friends and see. It was like one of those research assignments. Like, I'm not going to just, Google this and figure out what comes up. I'm going to talk to people I know who might have a better sense of this person's life. But that must have been like 2014 to 16, like that range, I think.
Yeah, and she was, who was her boyfriend? Because they were going through something at the time. It was a Lakers. Question. It was a Lakers player. It was.
It was Nick Young, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was Nick Young, and I can't remember. Something was going on with Nick Young at the time, and we tried to. I think that was how we justified it, and we tried to kind of wheedle our way into it, and she just wasn't. She was no commenting everything.
The thing I remember her being. I thought she was cool. In that, like, she seemed responsive to us in general. That's my only main recollection, but I could be off on
She
that.
seemed like a nice person. I have no idea what's happened with her since or whatever public scandals she may. I don't know about her and Diddy parties or anything like that. So this is not an endorsement nor condemnation of Iggy Azalea.
Is she still very popular? I just did a Google News search on her. I see She's gone all in on crypto, so we got that going on.
This was you at the West Virginia State Fair when we were up there covering the Texans and the
Yes.
Patriots. I tried to set you up with a carny, who I thought she had a kind of a dirtbag appeal that I thought you might like, but you were not into it at all. She was into it, but she wasn't. She also didn't have custody of her children, which is a big red flag. I remember that.
I gotta say, that was one of my favorite trips doing radio, because it was just you and I. And so there wasn't like the whole like Radio Row, like I'm going to be here with a million people kind of deal. And it was a focus thing. We were on East Coast time, I think. So we had an extra hour. It was training camp. So we had like good guests, the whole thing. And that, if people have not, where were we again? It was the Greenbrier.
The Greenbrier,
If people have not been to the Greenbrier, I can see why so many people enjoy being at the Greenbrier, because it was like, you think about the summer in Houston, July and August, and being there. Being there was like basically being in LA year round, essentially. It's like, 70 degrees, like no humidity whatsoever. Like that was a great trip. The only thing I'm envious about, I think the next year, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Landry and John like had dinner at the D'Antoni's house.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. That's right. Yeah, because Landry was tight with D'Antoni.
Exactly. Yes, yeah. I think that's public consumption. I think they talk about that, and so because he and his wife have a place up there, and so I am envious because I feel like D'Antoni would be cool as hell to hang out with in that kind of situation.
Oh, I had a conversation with D'Antoni once. Yeah, he was like every time I ever had a conversation with him, he kind of like Iggy Azalea. I know those two get compared a lot. He seemed like a genuine, just real person. His ego wasn't all inflated with whatever he had done in his career and everything. But I remember having a conversation with him. It might have been about Chip Kelly at the time, but about like running a wide open college like spread offense in the NFL. And I realized that every argument I was making against it was things that he had heard about why his offense wouldn't work, and it was interesting because the defense is going to suffer, all those things. It was kind of a microcosm of all of that.
Very similar. Yes.
I got one more picture. I can't remember
I'm wondering what your thought process was for finding and selecting these photos.
It was whatever I just scrolled through like the last 10 years, and this was on a Super Bowl trip. I can't remember which one. And I don't know if it was before or after. But
I'm just impressed that I was actually sleeping on a plane, which is usually for me like a 35% proposition.
I'm guessing it was on the way home from the Super Bowl then.
That makes sense. That's very fair. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. She had a baby with a rapper named Playboy Cardi, and he missed her giving birth to play video games with Lil Uzi Vert.
Lil Uzi Vert.
Iggy. She's like a little sister to us.
Yeah. She was fun. Yes.
All right.
I think I had that photo in like my dating app profile for a while. I recall just to like see what the comments would be to that.
How did it work? Did it work?
I think so. It wasn't like the best photo or anything, but I think it got some intrigue.
Do you still use dating apps?
I still use dating apps. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know that's the standard for the course. Does anybody? Can you even, if you want to date these days as a young single person, can you even not be on the dating apps?
Oh, I think you can.
I mean, you can, but I mean, is it night and day the difference?
I would say of the people who are like actively dating, I feel like it's got to be like 80 or 90% that are on the apps.
Have you ever tried to quit the apps and just go old school? Just walk up to people and talk to them?
I've like thought about it and maybe thought about bringing it up in therapy, but then the challenge is then it's like I actually have to like go up to women at bars and figure out like, are they single? Are they not single? Like looking for the ring is like just the first step in that process. And because some of the women I've dated, I've thought to myself like, would I ever go up to this person like if we were just in mixed company? And the answer is most likely not.
Right. So it's a conduit to kind of having a conversation in a way that it wouldn't. Yeah, because this is what I'm told, Sean, or excuse me, Mike. Damn it. This is what I'm told, that it's almost like if you try to approach people who are in their 20s, especially, they're just so unaccustomed to it that they almost like they're freaked out by it. That like even if you were doing it in the smoothest way possible by 1990 standards, then
Yeah.
it's unlikely to work out because it's more of a like, why is this stranger talking to me?
You know what I've realized about myself? You can tell me if you think this is wrong, but this is my self-diagnosis. I think I'm a combination of a socially awkward person, but somebody who is very, very, very socially aware, if that makes sense. Like, you know how like you'll be talking to people and like some people will bring up things and you're like, why are you bringing that's like not the topic? Like, why are you trying to like shoehorn this in? I feel like I'm in the top like 99 percentile of not doing that. Whether it's sports, politics, life, like whatever. Like I think I am elite at not ever making that kind of mistake.
So you're good at not making faux pas.
Yes, I think so.
This is the thing. I think most of the extroverts that I know, like good extroverts, people that are really interesting to be around and everything, I feel like they make faux pas all the time, and they just barrel on through them. And even if they're aware of them, they're kind of like, whatever you're gonna do. I got it. Oh yeah, sorry about that. We're still going fishing this weekend, right?
Can I give you a weird example about this that my mom's gonna be upset about, but it's cool, it's fine. So a couple weeks ago, I was in Denver. I met my niece, Sophie, who's great. She is 3 months old as of 5 days ago.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
My sister and her husband had a kid. And so we did Thanksgiving there. And they invited a guy for drinks who like lives right across the street. And this guy is from Chicago. He's Ukrainian, but he's like one of these diehard sports fans. Like I knew the moment that I talked to him, I'm like, oh, this guy's going to know the people I know in Chicago who like do media stuff. And so we're talking about that. And then my mom has the brilliant idea. She goes, do you, sorry to interrupt, but like, do you know who Josh Innes is? And like, so my mom, this is not a knock on Josh. My mom thinks that Josh should be the next Joe Rogan. I texted Josh that, right? Yeah. But so I'm like, this guy would not know who Josh is. And so I am elite in not making those sort of errors in a conversation.
You're right. Yeah, you would.
Yes.
But that's not like a huge mistake or anything, though.
It's not.
I think you're elite at not making faux pas because you're too reserved in what you'll throw out there, which is also one of the things that'll hold you back from. It's like if you were Rembrandt, but you were afraid to make a mistake on a brush stroke, you know?
That's true.
Yeah. You can paint over a bad brush stroke. I know painting.
There are probably some things that I'm like leaving on the cutting room floor that might work because I'm naturally kind of conservative when it comes to what to bring up in these kind of conversations.
Yeah, you got to just throw stuff out there. That was I was listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger's book a couple years ago, and one of the things that stuck out in my mind was that he said, you know, especially back in the 70s when he first started to become famous, he was like, you just say anything outrageous. And maybe it's awful, maybe it's brilliant, but it gets people's attention.
This is a good era to do that. I think it's a good era to do that in.
Well, it is and it isn't. I feel like it's a good era if the problem is that you used to be able to make those outrageous comments and people couldn't fact check you because they didn't have internet.
Yes.
Or if they did fact check you, it wasn't going to show up as a viral video somewhere. Like you always got to worry about that now too with a girl. You approach her and she might have a GoPro cam or something on.
Oh yeah.
And and then all of a sudden the cheesiest pickup line ever gets broadcast out to the masses.
Yes. If I was any level of famous person, that would be a concern. No question in this day and age.
Question came up this morning that I wanted to ask you about. We had framed it as who's going to play more snaps over the next few years, Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, did you? Okay.
I did. I was up early. I was with Paul Gallant on Fox 26 this morning.
Oh wow.
So this has been a good day of reunions for me.
You've got a jam-packed schedule. Yeah.
Jam-packed day today. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you that, and then I'll ask you a question about Paul. So he was, and as a Jets fan and somebody that monitors the situation a lot more closely than I am, do you expect Aaron Rodgers back next year?
I expect him to play somewhere, but I would say it's probably not going to be the Jets. Like one of the things I've been trying to do, Seth, in the last month or so is this will probably frustrate you, but I think there's something to it. Like there's this like, especially now in this era that we're in, like the hottest take wins. It's like the most recent thing is like the only thing that ever existed. Like we do live in a world, and I didn't expect this to happen. Like Russell Wilson was garbage 2 years ago, and I don't think he was much better at all last season. You might disagree. I don't know. The league agreed with that assessment. He's getting paid like $1.25 million, whatever it is. So if we were talking 2 years ago or a year ago, the idea of Russell Wilson leading a team that could end up with a 2 or 3 seed in the AFC would have been preposterous, especially playing at the level that he has. So Rodgers, I would say, has played obviously below expectations, but there are flashes. It's like there are inconsistencies. Like he played pretty well, I thought, against Miami on Sunday, but he missed like one big throw to Garrett Wilson. Seattle the week before didn't play very well, missed one throw that probably could have ended the game. Then a pick six on the following play basically turns the whole game around. But like there's enough flashes there to where I think, okay, if you give him another offseason coming off of the Achilles, then maybe a la Russell Wilson, he plays better next season than this season. Like in a vacuum, I think that's a very logical, thought process to have. Yeah. The thing you worry about is next season he's 1 year older and he's 41. But if he was like 33, I would say this is a down season and he will be better next season, would be my evaluation. And to answer your question, like Rodgers or Deshaun, I guess the question would be like, how close is Deshaun to being out of the league entirely? Something I'm not like completely sure on. Like both will be in the league. So here's the thing, like Deshaun has to be in the league next season, obviously, whereas Rodgers does not. But past next season, I don't know if Deshaun is going to be in the league, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm way more confident. Let me phrase it this way. I am substantially more confident that Aaron will be a starting quarterback next season than Deshaun to be the starting quarterback of Cleveland.
Okay.
And we can revisit that because I just think that the PR, the whole, like everything around the franchise, like they at minimum have to bring in competition for Deshaun in Cleveland next season. There's no way he can come back as the unquestioned starting quarterback. No way.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I was almost, Jameis has grown on me. And I kind of wanted, I'm like, okay, you know what? This would be an awesome redemption story. But I've just seen enough of the bad Jameis, including this last game versus the Steelers, where they had opportunity after opportunity to actually claw their way back into the game there. But it was a combination of Jameis being Jameis and Kadarius Toney being Kadarius Toney that I just don't know if it's in the cards for Jameis Winston. They've got to have somebody else in the mix there. Yeah, and I guess the other part with the Browns is, if you're going to try to salvage whatever Deshaun still has left in the tank, I don't think it's Kevin Stefanski's fault, but I feel like you'd have to do it with somebody different than Kevin Stefanski. And that puts you in a tough, but I mean, they put themselves there, but that's the situation they're in.
Yeah, and I don't think firing Stefanski is a tenable proposition right there, because I think there's the feeling that he's won Coach of the Year twice. I think he's done a good job. Like, I actually think Stefanski's the kind of guy who, were he to get fired, I think he would actually get a job immediately elsewhere in the NFL.
Even without like an interim year as an OC somewhere, he would just get picked up as a head coach?
I think so, unless he wanted that interim season. And I also think the bigger point, and something I've been thinking about, Seth, for a few months, I know there are never enough starting quarterbacks in the NFL, but in 2025, given that I only see 2 college players right now who I think are going to be week 1 or close to its starters, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, I am fascinated by how the 32 NFL teams are going to find 32 legitimate starting quarterbacks in week 1. Like, I don't know how the game of musical chairs is going to end up, because I don't think there are going to be like, and I'm using a pretty low bar. Like a couple of years ago, I think in 2022 or 3, you could start week 1 and say, hey, every team has like viable hope at quarterback for some reason or other, whether it's like a star, a rookie, mid-level guy, whatever. Next season, I don't see 32 guys who could fit into that category that actually give you hope for different reasons. And I'm very intrigued to see what these teams are going to do.
Well, and I don't know, just the whole process of evaluating not just college quarterbacks, but even NFL quarterbacks now, I think because the game has changed so much and the position has changed so much, that it's an incredible crapshoot. I don't know what to make of Anthony Richardson right now. I mean, it's rare that somebody comes along and redefines, okay, what you can and can't do in a position, but there are games where he's completing less than 50% of his passes and yet is an integral part of a victory. I mean, the Colts started off as 2.5-point favorites this week versus the Broncos, the computer simulations still have the Colts winning that game, and in Denver. And I don't get it. The line got driven down, and now the Broncos are favorites. But I think, and then you look at older quarterbacks like Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield or Geno Smith or whomever else, and like picking guys up off the scrap heap, expecting them to perform really well in their first 2 years doesn't seem to be as much of it. You shouldn't have that expectation as much anymore, but you can't sit and develop them. I think you're just going to see more and more teams just say, look, we got to shoot our shot. And I don't think that Nick Caserio, even when they would have had the decision between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, I'd be surprised if people in NFL front offices had firm and adamant opinions between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I think that there were guys that could have convinced themselves of either guy. I think I know a lot of actual NFL people were scared as hell of Bryce Young's size, but they might have been willing to go with it. But those two guys right there are just as far apart as you can get in terms of the conventional quarterback and what you look for versus how they look physically and everything else. If I'm the Jets, that can be a great opportunity, but it can also be a great way to spend 2 more years of being in Zach Wilsonville.
Yeah, I just wonder, like a team like the Jets or, the Giants, depending on how high they draft or not, like I think in the first round or in the top 10, like it's going to be Shador, it's going to be Cam Ward in some kind of order. I don't really see another guy who is going to go in the first round. Maybe I'm missing somebody. And so I think about guys like, Justin Fields. Like it's hard to name 32 guys for next season before you get to somebody like Justin Fields. It's just hard to rattle off 32 names. And I also wonder, especially with Kirk Cousins' turnovers, I know that contract is kind of structured to where ideally he'd play 2 years, then you move on to Michael Penix. But I kind of wonder, Seth, like given that teams are going to be desperate for even a placeholder, does it make sense for a team like Atlanta to take the cap hit and maybe trade Cousins for even some small level of value? Because again, I keep going back to it, like I don't think you can find 32 guys for next season before you run into Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix in some order.
Yeah.
And does it behoove Atlanta, given if that's the reality, to move on from Cousins, quote unquote, early because you can extract some value across the league?
What do you think happens with Deion?
If I was Deion, first of all, I've been wrong on Deion, like a lot of people have. Like I didn't really like the lack of high school recruiting. It felt like there was so much focus on the transfer portal and really, the 2 or 3 big players that they have. But he did a very, very good job this season. Like they played a legitimate schedule. They, won their 8 or 9 games. They threatened for the Big 12 championship game up until the end. I have a hard time. It's weird. You would think that coaching in the NFL is a little easier than college, given the portal, NIL, all of it. And yet, for some reason, I feel like if I'm Deion Sanders, like, why would I want to go to the NFL? Like, was it his goal always to be an NFL head coach? Is he fine with staying there now that his kids are going to be playing in the NFL? I know they got a 5-star quarterback to commit out of this 2025 class, I think a week or 2 ago. What do you feel like Deion is somebody who wants to be a head coach in the NFL?
I think, who did you used to say this about? Darrelle Revis. You would, which is a good appropriate comparison maybe when it comes to, you had always said that Darrelle Revis is really good at making money. Like he knows how to work his value and how to get the right contract. He held out while he was under contract for the Jets. He got that 2-year deal in Tampa. And I feel like, with Deion, there's a big difference between $5 million a year and $15 million a year, or whatever god crazy number somebody like the Cowboys might throw at him hypothetically. So I think that'd be the simplest explanation, to use the old Occam's razor thing, is that, man, I think some NFL teams might be able to pay him more than Colorado can.
Yeah, if I'm an owner, I look at the Colorado situation and I wonder how much of this is replicable at the NFL level. Like it seems like they're winning. They won a lot on the basis of the star quarterback plus the best player in college football. Now, Deion gets credit for recruiting those guys, obviously, and bringing them from Jackson State. And to be fair, there are other things that are in the mix. Like you can't win 8 to 9 games if you have dreadful offensive lines and dreadful defensive lines just on the basis of 2 players. But I would wonder, like, big picture, okay, the things that Deion has done well at Jackson State and Colorado, how much of that can I realistically replicate in the NFL?
Yeah. Okay, so you said you were talking to Paul this morning on Fox. Wait, he's on Fox in the mornings, right?
He's on there sometimes, yes. Yeah, Nate Griffin asked us to come, so I'm like, absolutely, I will get up early.
Crap. Nate. I got to text Nate. Nate asked me to come on a few weeks ago, and I just didn't. I didn't see the text, and I think he's mad at me. Okay,
I think he's fine.
So for a brief period of time, the morning show, Mad Radio, when it was on in the mornings, we had Paul Gallant as our co-host, and Paul to this day blames himself for screwing up Mad Radio, and I try to tell him over and over again, no, it just wasn't. It wasn't a you thing. It just wasn't. At that period in time, it probably just wasn't the right mix, and it was like a whole lot of other stuff going on. And I'm going to say this publicly: it was my fault that it didn't work out with all 3 of us on Mad Radio. I think I talked back then, especially. I talk way too much, and I think for Paul and I, who can kind of both. Paul and I both are more maybe like confrontational than you. It was a bad mix between the 3 of us, and then Paul, who you and I didn't know, basically had instruction. Paul was supposed to almost be like, I don't know, like an intern type guy that just weighed in and chimed in every now and then, which that's not Paul. So that's not Paul's fault. It was the person who decided to throw all 3 of us into the mix at 6 a.m. to begin with. Is that a fair assessment of it?
Oh, I think it's a fair assessment. Yeah, I think like in any like business, any line of work, it's nice to have like open communication about like, hey, what are the plans? What do we need to change? Like what's everybody's role here? So we can so everybody can be on the same page. But I think like in general, not even specific to Paul and you and myself, it's like there's a reason why it's hard to have 3-person daily sports talk radio shows. It seems to work more in the podcast setting, I suppose, where you don't have the same like kind of time issues that you might have in radio. But like in general, having, as you well know, like having a 3-person show in sports is not an easy thing in radio in general.
Yeah, in radio where you're trying to do things in 12-minute segments and you kind of got to get in and get out. But it's looser than on television. It's difficult. And then after that, it was. I remember the boss at the time. That was a different boss. The new boss came in, and he shuffled things around a lot. Well, you know what? I think I might have a picture here. Oh no, I didn't put it in. There's a picture of you, me, Rich Lord, Garrett Heinrich, Nick Wright. I think it was at the San Francisco Super Bowl.
That sounds right.
In San Francisco at dinner that night.
That was a good dinner.
Yeah, that was a really good. Ted Johnson was there. Yep. And that was a really good one. But when that new boss came in that really shuffled things up, I remember I had conversations with him where I was like, listen, if you could just go back and listen to when it was just Mike and me at middays, it was a different show. It was a different show, man. But that guy had it in for you, I think. Did you get that sense that guy had it in for you?
That's a good question. I think in for would be going too far. I think, kind of like any coach, or anybody who like comes into any organization, it's like you want to put your own stamp on things. Yeah. And so I think I was probably like a victim of that sort of deal. That was kind of my overall sense. Because remember,
so that the problem was though too. I think the format all of a sudden turned into, you and I had been working together for years and we had a really good rapport. And all of a sudden he wanted to turn it into basically 4 hours of you interviewing the ex-athlete. And it just wasn't comfortable. It wasn't what worked for us and everything. It was just, I didn't like it. It was
You didn't like it. Yes, you didn't like it. Yeah. And this is the thing, like this is what you deal with obviously on a daily basis. Like, Houston is a very difficult market to figure out in sports radio. Like that's reality. It is a very challenging market to figure out. I know there are 3 stations. Objectively, there probably should only be 2. And obviously I want everybody to keep their jobs and everything, but I'm just talking like And
in terms of the way this market is and everything, three kind of muddles things up. Yeah.
Yes, like this is a market for two sports radio stations. One should have the Texans, the other should have the Astros and the Rockets, and I think that would help kind of the audience. But there's always been, it's like there have been different periods where, and you know the ratings obviously up to date way better than I do, but just looking at the last 14 years, like when Josh and Rich were doing their thing in 2011, 2012. That to me was like the highest it's really been. I don't know if that's like a factual certainty, but that's when the buzz really, to me, when the Texans actually got good the first time. And like you've gone back and forth, but not you specifically, you being the general, is like how much Texans talk should there be? How much Rockets, Astros talk should there be? How much general culture should there be? Can you create like a Miami, for example, is not a huge sports radio market, but can you create like a Dan Le Batard style show in a place like Houston where there's like one huge talent who just basically is the sun for which every other, show kind of rotates. But I think like with the different program directors and the theories and everything, like I think it just speaks to it is not an easy market to figure out. It is very challenging.
I don't, when you said like I know the ratings better than you, I stopped paying attention to ratings a long time ago.
Smart.
And for the most part, I just care about like, all right, what are our podcasts? What are we doing streaming? All of that stuff. Because ultimately, I mean, that is the future and where it's going. And that's where like sports radio is probably the luckiest of all the old classic conventional media stuff. Ours just transfers directly to streaming. Like it's not even, you don't have to do anything other than put a camera in front of it. And it's a podcast, and it's streaming and it's all the same. And because of the streaming and the online presence and the way everything has changed, I don't think it hasn't felt like, not just in Houston, but elsewhere, it doesn't feel like the radio station versus radio station has the same juice that it used to. Because it's really anybody, whether it's a podcaster, if it's some kid that just started out, he's in that same pool of competition for just getting people's attention. So whether it's over the air or online or on TikTok or anything else like that, I just want to show growth on that side of it. And I figure like if you're doing that, then you're probably doing all right on the ratings as well. I let the salespeople worry about the ratings.
No, that makes complete sense to me. Like it definitely, it feels to me as someone who's still in it, but like has like, 1 foot in it, so to speak, that it's really changed pretty dramatically these last like 4 to 5 years with the focus on YouTube clips. And it's more of an on-demand world. Like I'll always be a big sports radio listener and, person and such. I find myself being very big on like the content on demand part, including like, I really like the podcasts where you've got the timestamps on what is being talked about at a certain point. Cause I'm like, okay, let me skip the other stuff and go like right to what I want to hear first. And then I can go back and check out the other stuff. But I find it's very like, I'm big, like I listen to Mad Dog Russo's show, or I'll listen to, college football podcasts, and I'll look at the timestamps and be like, okay, I want to hear the open, or I want to hear this segment. So that's how my listening habits have changed over the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, no, I remember a few years ago, when people outside of Houston would say like, oh, so you do a podcast, right? I'd be like, no, I have a radio show. Now I'm like, oh, thank God they think I'm a podcaster. Yes, I'm a podcaster. I'm not, I'm not out there like trying. It's like being a newspaper writer back in the day. It was like, oh yeah, you write for the Chronicle, do you? Now it's like, yeah, I do, but I also stream, and you can check me out here and there and everything.
Yes.
It's
weird. Like I get more people asking me about my podcast, which I need to restart on like the sports and sports law related stuff. I get more questions about like, do you have a podcast versus like the stuff I do and have done for SiriusXM for like the last 5.5 years.
Yeah, like
I get more.
Sirius is kind of Sirius used to be one of the only places you could go and be heard nationally by however large the audience was. But now it is like if you can afford an internet connection, and even then you don't have to. You could record at home and then go down to the coffee shop and upload it there.
That is true. Yes,
it's a lot different.
By the way, real quick side note, something you may appreciate: the first deposition that I ever took of a guy last fall. He was this was like a workers' comp case. This guy was in West Virginia, and he was like, I guess he had no internet at his house. So he was sitting in his car. This is over Zoom, obviously. He's sitting in his car using the Wi-Fi from the gas station that he's parked in. And I'm about to embark on like a, I don't know, 2 to 4 hour deposition. Yeah. And I had one of those moments like I have in radio sometimes where it's like, okay, something has happened right in front of me, or like some development has happened, and I just need to adjust to it very quickly because this is how this is going to be.
And that was your first deposition you ever did?
First one, yes.
Did it hold up? Did the internet connection hold up?
Internet connection was fine. Yes, everything held up, so it went okay. Yes,
okay,
it went well. Yes, it was just it was a very unique way to start. I'll put it that way.
So I haven't really talked to you since you took your new partnership and everything. Are you? Is being a lawyer about what you expected it to be? Good, bad, or indifferent?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. I'm at a new firm, which I should probably do a better job of promoting. So it's Meltzer PLLC. And I guess the good thing for us is that technically anybody can be a potential client because all we do is employment law. So whether people are on, our employees or employers, which encompasses almost everybody, like that's the kind of work that we do. So it's a litigation firm, but we do a lot of advice and counseling. We help people through different situations, both companies and individuals. I would say like it's relatively about what I expected. I had some challenges at my last firm, but I really enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
And I'm working with a law partner who I don't know if you've met her yet, but is a really great person to work with and for.
That's good. Yeah, no, and I would imagine law firms especially, I know the culture and everything is different from one to the next, and you can kind of, you sometimes get stuck in a place that's just not a culture fit.
That's what I would say, yes. But I'm also mindful of like, I can learn from a lot of different people where even if it's not the best working relationship at the time, that you take different things from it moving forward.
Oh, okay. So good. That reminds me. This is a question I have. Because when you were in law school, you used to do a negotiating competition every year. And I was always intrigued because I'm like, how's that look, like a mock negotiation where nobody's skin is actually in the game? And then I realized, like, oh yeah, with lawyers, their skin isn't in the game. I mean, they're getting paid, but they're negotiating on behalf of somebody else, so it makes sense. So actually, when you started doing the negotiation competition, I realized, like, I actually got to learn how to negotiate. So I've taken like just a few little online things and everything to try to be a better negotiator. But this is my current theory about hometown discounts. I feel like, say with Alex Bregman, I don't think that most athletes are going to take necessarily an outright financial hometown discount these days, and I don't blame them for it. Like $30 million is a lot of money, no matter where your home is.
Yes.
I wonder, can the hometown negotiation or the hometown discount look more like, okay, Bregman and the Astros can, in good faith, maybe enter more of a win-win negotiation style, where they can sit and maybe have conversations where you come up with different scenarios when we're talking about years, how the contract is structured, all of that other stuff. And maybe with Bregman understanding what the Astros' limitations or their philosophy is, that maybe there's an avenue to a deal with Bregman that might not be there with other teams if it doesn't look like the standard, league leading deal.
I feel like you have to. Yeah, I really like the negotiation stuff. Like I'm reading 2 negotiation related books as we speak, and I'm just fascinated. It's like it's just an interesting idea that like through the power of words and conversation, you can like change people's like fundamental beliefs and their positions. It's like a really interesting concept when you think about it, right? Like that you can actually like alter things by what you say. Anyway,
especially when in your perception going into it, like if you know nothing about business or anything, you're kind of like, all right, well, yeah, these guys both want to make money and they're going to try to do what's best for them. That the way you frame questions or the way you can show empathy or actually listen or redirect things. Just getting the other person to believe that you're not a bastard for one, like that it goes a long way.
It really does. So applying it to Bregman, I would say, I think that's possible. I mean, ultimately, like it's going to come down to the bottom line dollars. I think you probably have to be like 90 to 95% of the way there, and then you can probably sell him on some of the soft stuff, like the value of being an Astro from start to finish, and what that would mean, like. Could you see Bregman in a scenario like they've had, Jose Cruz, Biggio, Bagwell, that sort of thing, if that has value to him? I could see that being part of a successful negotiation, but because of his agent and just hitting free agency for the first time, I do think a key component is going to be like, maybe it's not going to be a Juan Soto where it's like, hey, I'm going to go to the place that gives me I am a mercenary completely, which is fine. I think this one could be a little different given the level of success that Alex has had in one city with one fan base. The only organization he's known. So I think it's more possible here.
And the fact that Altuve's never weighed in as vocally about
at all
any of these guys. And he's still best buds with Correa and everything, but Altuve just seems like he's putting his tiny little foot down on this one.
Well, they're at a crossroads in the sense that, like, this was the offseason where they're at a crossroads. Because I think the team can still be good next season and win the division. But like with the farm, like you basically have a combination of an aging baseball team with a lousy farm system, which is not easy to maintain any level of success. Mm-hmm. And so if I were them, like, there would be real temptation to re-sign Bregman because clearly a lot of people in the organization want him back. I, like Jim Crane, don't love long-term deals either. I'm more, even just in my own finances, like I'm a pay-as-you-go kind of person. Like I know Juan Soto is going to be great, but I just struggle with like, okay, I'm paying someone from age 26 to age 41, and yeah, you can give me a graph and show me that I'm going to get excess value the next 7 years, but I'm like, he's on the payroll for the next 15. Yeah. I mentally, really financially struggle with that piece of it. But to the Soto thing, because Juan Soto signed for so much, there are only 3 guys who have a higher WAR than Kyle Tucker the last like 4 years. I think it's Soto, Judge, and Mookie Betts. That's it. Point being, I know Tucker's like 2 years older, but Kyle Tucker's getting $400 million or $450 or $500, like somewhere in that, it might be more, in that general range. And so knowing that Crane is highly unlikely to go to that level, like, do they seriously think about trading him, which Dana Brown has talked this week that they are taking calls on everybody.
Yeah, right. He'll have conversations. There are no. You know what? That's interesting, especially when you look at it in the context of Kyle Tucker before he was ever a viable major league player was one of the untouchables. And remember, we were wondering, why is he so untouchable? And then 2 years later, I was like, of course he was always untouchable. Everybody could see it. Now, that's a big departure. Dana Brown specifically saying we'll listen to everything is a big difference from back when there were guys who were untouchable. And it struck me, I don't know if you heard us talking about it this morning, but I was just reading about Stephen Cohen, right? The owner of the Mets.
Yep, Steve Cohen.
Like the difference between Stephen Cohen, who's a hedge fund guy, versus Jim Crane, who's runs an actual business. No disrespect to our hedge fund managers, but hedge fund managers are kind of living in just a completely fantasy world where it's just numbers and dots on a screen more so than actual widgets that you got to produce or contracts you have to deliver on. And I think it's monopoly money for Stephen Cohen, where with Jim Crane, he's an actual real life businessman that wouldn't buy a product for a piece of equipment or anything else that he knows is going to be defunct 10 years from now. And I don't know if those two, especially without the cash influx that those big market teams have, I don't know if you ever get there. All right. Yeah. I originally thought I would only keep you for a half hour. And since you have a real job, I think I'm going to let you go.
This has been a lot of fun, so I appreciate it.
It has been, and I don't like bringing my friends on without paying them with any kind of regularity. But now that I have sponsors, I'm going to figure out a way for you and I to have
buy me lunch or dinner the next time you were in town. Which reminds me, I think
what kind of negotiating tactic you're using here.
There's a partner
of my BS, you timeshare salesman bastard.
I'll do the possibly awkward thing that I criticized my mom for. So there's a partner in my last law firm that likes you a lot and would like to have lunch with all of us. Okay. So let's make that happen.
Likes me like in a platonic, like a sports type way, not a
correct,
not a threatening my marriage
has a
type
wife.
Of way. Okay,
he has a wife. She is also a fan of yours. Yes.
Okay. Oh, good. That's perfect then.
Yes.
All right, man.
So let's make
Meltzer,
that happen.
Follow him on X at Mike Meltzer with an S. The first 2 months I knew Mike, I was spelling it with a Z until his mother corrected me. And then and say hello to your parents, please. But also on Blue Sky, which I thought was pronounced Blueski for the first 3 weeks I was aware of it.
That's funny.
However, Instagram and everything else, follow Mike Meltzer and go. And if you need employment law representation, seek out Mike Meltzer's help as well.
Seth, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on. Everybody like, subscribe, etc. Thanks, man.
Thank you.